I want you to get together.
Well, thank you, Paul, for coming on the channel today. It's been a while because we talked about this a while back, and you've done a lot of podcasts. So I'm really grateful for you making the time to come here. And we always say we share a lot of the same subscribers, which is
Hmm.
really nice to see everyone today. So thanks everyone for joining. Um, but yeah, I wanted to sort of hone in on the little season and your expertise, which is vast compared to my own
Well,
in the realm of that sort of clown, joker, jester theme. And I think that is actually, it's been occurring to me, I would say, over the last year, that the comedy theme, the jester theme, the trickster, all of this is massively impactful in the little season.
mm.
So I think there's a lot of overlap. Maybe you've done some thinking about that too. What are your first thoughts about that?
Well, obviously, as the guy who wrote the book on the thing, yeah, I've definitely noticed in our time, especially even just the last decade, the symbol of a clown, which is a representation of demons, specifically the Nephilim, is extremely prevalent in mainstream media today, and is in fact being pushed on the people who are alive today, especially in the Western world, even through fashion, and let alone just television itself. Even just at the start of last year, clown core fashion was all the rage, and on all the catwalks and all the high end places in France and Spain, and anywhere where fashion is prevalent, and it's kind of, they are quite literally trying to get us to dress that way now. Um, and as I've kind of explained in my work, as a quick summary for those who don't know, maybe on your channel, um, the costume of a clown is actually a copy of pretty much the same costumes worn by a lot of cultures all over the earth who wear that costume to specifically channel the spirits of what they call their ancestors. But they mean gods, primordial energy beings that created their civilization. They don't mean grandma and granddad as we would understand the word ancestor to mean. And we have copied that in the West and created what we call a clown. And it was created intentionally by secret societies, I believe, for this exact reason, to channel demons, but do it under the cover of something harmless and innocent for children. We're not supposed to know that's what it represents, but my work is showing that everywhere else it's pretty clear that is exactly what that costume is used for, and ours is not that dissimilar at all to the representations of ancestor spirits all over the earth. And like I said, they're quite literally pushing this through all forms of media, whether it's music, film, or fashion, or art, especially the art scene that's full of people dressing like clowns in a ridiculous manner. But the more idols they can create, which people can mimic, that have that visage and image to them, then the more channels and portals they're opening through people for spirits to possess. And that's kind of the end game of the whole thing. If you can get more people dressing like something in the spiritual realm, you're creating more channels to those entities in the spiritual realm. And it seems like if we are in the little season, which is another part of our work, um, it would make sense that during this time, Satan would do everything he possibly could to help his army get here in a physical sense through willing vessels like ourselves who unwittingly dress like clowns, not knowing that what we're actually doing is letting the demons in a sense. So it does seem to coincide with living in a time where Satan is ruling, doesn't it? So I don't know if you've thought any more about it than I have, but it's definitely there. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess, all of that. So the channeling of this kind of spiritual entity across modern culture everywhere. Well, like you say, it sort of emerged out of these tribal demonstrations like ritual and things like that. And it's
Hmm.
now on the fashion screen, it's on TV, it's everywhere. It's kind of invaded our lives, this clown thing.
Hmm.
And I even see that. And this is my channel. I wouldn't, risk saying some things on your channel, but in terms of the drag face and things like that, I think there is a potential there that a lot of that is, copied from that same theme
Hmm.
and goes along with the worship of those entities and whatnot. So
I
yeah,
feel like it's tricky because it's hard to know whether what came first, the chicken or the egg type of situation. Are these people dressing like this and then channeling demons after the fact? Or do they already have demonic influence in their life and they begin to manifest this style of dress because it's mirroring
mm,
what's happening within without them even consciously being aware of it? It's more like the demon inside of them is making the vessel dress like them. so the
Mhm.
demon can be more comfortable in its skin in a way. It's hard to truly tell, but there is that phenomenon, as you kind of touched on there, that what I call the multicolored collective is like some feeble attempt to get around the algorithm to who we're actually talking about here. But there is this extremely ideological, specifically left-leaning group of people. And I'm not in the politics game. I'm not like a right winger or a left winger or either or. I don't play that Hegelian dialectic game. But there are these people who do seem to have more socialist, extreme left ideologies who tend to, when they get really into it, wave around a multicolored flag, which is very colorful, and they tend to dye their hair some crazy colored, mutilate themselves, cover themselves in tattoos or in piercings and everything else. And before you know it, they look anything akin to what we would call a clown quite quickly. And you have to
Mhm.
wonder, what is the spirit moving through that movement that causes such a thing? And is it no
Mhm.
coincidence that the literal motto is pride? And these entities are quite literally a result of the pride of the fallen angels and man thinking they can become better than God themselves, and creating the Nephilim, which are quite literally pride incarnate. It doesn't get more prideful
Mhm.
than a Nephilim demon. So
Yeah.
you do have to wonder. The symbolism's all there, but it's pure speculation on my part. But if we know what spiritual warfare is and how it works, how it manifests physically, there is no real separation from the spirit realm and the physical realm. So when you see physical manifestations of extremely colorful clown-like people screaming and screeching for horrible rites, which should not be human rights, which involve murder and mutilation, while sporting extremely colorful visages, from my research, the spirit behind that does seem perhaps to align with what I've said about clowns and demons.
Yeah.
But I know how it sounds as I say it. But
Mhm.
this is not really a joke. I'm deadly
Yeah.
serious. Like, what happens
Yeah.
in the physical manifests in the spiritual and vice versa all the time. And now we know what the enemy looks like with the clown research. I think we're going to start seeing this a lot more.
Yeah. I mean, I think something like you saying it's deadly serious, I think it's like the ultimate sociopathic move, abusive move actually on people is
Hmm.
you hate them and you want them to be destroyed, Christians and regular people who might find Jesus, and you want them all laughing while that happens. It's kind of pretty sick in my mind. That's just kind of the thing that's coming across to me in this time where,
Hmm.
it's almost like people rely on comedy just to get through the day. you know,
Yeah,
like,
well, meme culture is a powerful part of like the spirit running through the time, and I think around the 2016 period is when we had the first election cycle where Trump was involved, and this was obviously pre the Crown situation. But during that extremely tumultuous political time, everything was being described as clown world. And Pepe the Frog, like the meme, was very prevalent then, which was a very irreverent towards life and the reality of the situations we were living through. And there was all sorts of links back to like Egyptian gods called Kek and all sorts of things. It was kind of a running joke, though. I don't think there's so much really there, but it's kind of that they created this mythos surrounding this character. But Clown World was a very uh, powerful descriptive meme for the reality we were living in. I think people were really feeling it during that time. And it
yeah,
coincided with the 2016 clown sightings as well. That kind of also kicked it off at the
yeah.
exact same time, which kind of sparked my research.
Hmm.
Because they don't show something on the TV unless it's there for a reason. Everything's a symbol to these people. Everything's a coded message. When every single news station from Canada to America to Britain was covering clowns scaring people, then I knew it meant something. But I think it
Yeah.
was a reflection of the spirits which were running rampant during this season, which is irreverence towards humanity and kind of making a joke things that should be considered serious, like the leadership of humanity and the future of humanity. But you
Hmm.
do find what arose out of all of that was this apathetic passivity among the youth and even people that, well, what's the point anymore? I kind of give up. It's all just one giant joke. Life is a
Hmm.
joke. Nothing should be taken seriously, and we don't have any power or any say in what's really going on. And rather than people getting mad about that or seeking out answers of what solutions could be to something like that, spiritual solutions, I would say finding Christ is the ultimate solution, but they instead became these nihilistic, apathetic um, jokesters. in a way. And I
Mm-hmm.
think you know, at the same time we had the Joker coming out not long after that, a couple of years. And I think his representation in the recent film with Joaquin Phoenix was kind of this idea of a revolutionary who's so done with the system, you know, that he kind of has taken it upon himself to become a savior-like figure. But this time it's the clown, and it's done through destruction of the old world and through complete irreverence and again nihilistic passivity to any authority whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the opposite of Christ when you really think about it, because Christ is all about submission to the kingdom and his ultimate authority and the Son
Yeah.
of God, you know, and it doesn't get much more righteous than the Son of God when you really get down to brass tacks. But what
Mm-hmm.
people were identifying with more so in our culture was the clown or the Joker. And they were seeing themselves in that character, I think, in a big way, which is why it was such a box office success at its time and why people
Yeah.
really, really got attached to that symbol and that idea. But when you really understand that what a clown really represents, it's purely demonic. It always has been.
Yeah.
But they get people identifying with it, don't they, and sympathizing with it, as though it's good to be the Joker in a way because you
Yeah.
rising above the system, you know, or whatever it is. And I can get how they got people there. It's because the system is terrible and it's supposed to be terrible because it's supposed to lead you into these nihilistic worldviews and paths. If you haven't got Christ, then you'll end up becoming a Joker. It seems to be how it always goes, you know.
Yeah.
And it's odd, isn't it? It's an odd mimetic
Yeah.
scenario we find ourselves in, which kind of transcends just the physical realm, and there's the symbolism that runs through our daily lives in these movies and through our reactions to things is all kind of one giant zeitgeist narrative of humanity all weaved together. It's very, very strange. But if there's a
Mm-hmm.
symbol of our current time, it's the clown. And
Yeah.
that's a bad sign if the clown is what I think it is. So that's my
Yeah.
current diatribe. I'll give it back to you, Madeline.
Yeah, no, I mean, it all adds up completely, and you fill in so many of the blanks. And I think that just going to, a society without Jesus, the further and further we get from Jesus as a society, we actually lose our minds, just like the clown. It's like that madness that comes as a part of, that chaos theory that
Mm,
is sort of embedded into that whole um, myth or ethos or whatever you want to call it. But something that I noticed, so like this is just as I go through a lot of the old pictures and things, most of us used to comment on, wow, they never smiled in the old pictures, right? Like it was always this like really sort of sad looking group of people that, and I've got some pictures here actually, I'll just share. So the trajectory, I guess, is we've gone to these sorts of very, and I feel like the people back in those days still had a remnant of like, things are not okay. This is not how they should be. That how we're living right now is really hard, and this is not good for us, and we're not happy. Almost like, even people who had it really good, they didn't smile, and I always wondered why was that. Well, I guess, that probably came along with cameras being more accessible and people taking a lot more pictures. Maybe they just kind of naturally drifted into a more smiley society. But uh, people were really, it doesn't seem like they were prone to smile as much. I don't know if that was just a camera thing. You're a photographer as well, which is really handy. But um, what are your thoughts on, okay, so let me just go I'll just go through a few more here because I'm going to go into the smiling modern day, right? And like we smile, I smile when I'm happy. I smile with my children. And, this is normal. But why? I feel like the clown jester thing was almost this forced image into the mind of humanity, like making you feel like you had to, like monkey see, monkey do. You see it, so that's what you have to start reflecting. I don't know. Do you think
no,
there's
no,
any
no, no.
psychology to that at all?
I probably likely. I mean, there is the obvious reason why they weren't smiling then, and it's because life was just terrible then. It was just really bad,
Mm-hmm.
and there wasn't
Oh
really
yeah.
much to smile about. But at the same time, we're theorizing, if maybe those pictures were taken at the start of a little season of Satan. I mean, imagine how terrible that would have been, all the wars they were going through, the destruction of everything, and the complete backwards degradation of civilization that they were probably living through, you know, or in the remnants of, or the back end of, is probably can explain why. Why. But there is also this idea that people didn't really know what to do with cameras when they first came around. They didn't really understand them. There's lots of footage out there of people like when people are like recording a city or something, people just standing in front of the camera, like not really knowing what to do, just staring at it. You know, it's kind of, they don't really understand. I think that it's like a moment of trying to figure it out. Like, what is this thing and what is it doing exactly, and how does it work? She looks more like she's trying to that one there, for example. She's trying to figure out what the camera's doing exactly to get the image. It's like, how does this work? You know, and so I think there is that. But then at the same time, it's kind of, I think people were a lot more solemn during these times because it was just a case of like, well, life is a struggle, and you know, and I think that people were a lot more religious back then, and I think they had a more serious nature about what it means to exist, and understanding that, you know, God's watching and all these type of things, and we shouldn't be wasting our time on frivolous things. We need to be focusing on bettering our lives, caring for our loved ones, building a home, building a future for future generations. And it's kind of, they had their minds on more important matters than fun necessarily, and that's fine. I think that's quite healthy for people not to think that to be happy and to have fun is the meaning of life, because it's not the meaning of life. It's vapid, it's fleeting, and you're lucky if you have any moments at all where the happiness is what's happening. It shouldn't be the main goal, but you should appreciate when those moments come. Absolutely, you know, because when you have a moment of happiness, cling on to it and enjoy it while you can, because very few and far in between when those moments do actually happen. And I think today our society is very much geared towards instant gratification, the stimulation of our neurons and shiny things, flashing things, keeping us addicted to things. You know, our attention spans are shorter than ever, and we're always craving that next dopamine hit. And I think we're kind of wired to believe that if I'm not smiling all the time, my life is meaningless, or I'm not happy, I'm not worth surviving. And it's kind of, that's actually manic to think that way. And I think religious people, not just Christians, understand, most religious people, but Christians as well, even Buddhists, understand life is suffering, you know, and it's kind of, you have to embrace that part of reality to get by correctly. I mean, Christ suffered. You know, it wasn't, even for the Son of God, existence wasn't easy, and it's not supposed to be easy. Unfortunately, it's a fallen, corrupted world that we have to live in, and you're going to suffer here. Only that's what the promise of the new heaven and earth is, and the promise of the kingdom, a better world with no more tears. It's all there for a reason, and that is our blessed hope, that we get to enter that kingdom in the end of it all, you know, through our faith in Christ. And obviously other religions have their own versions of describing their way, how they're going to get to that place of nirvana, shall we say, you know, but I think obviously they've got it all wrong. But I think it's a fundamental understanding for spiritual people that life is suffering and happiness is fleeting, and it shouldn't be your goal in life. And I think if you want to foster more moments of happiness, you're supposed to create meaning and take on responsibility, in fact, take on burdens for others, which involves charity, helping the widows, helping the sick, feeding the poor, whatever it is, you know. But giving to others and sacrificing yourself for others tends to elevate happiness in life and a sense of meaning more so. But I think even then we wouldn't laugh about it because we know there's problems, and I think those people in those pictures were dealing with that view of reality. But today it's all about self, narcissism, presenting a false mask to the world through those images. And if you're not smiling, then what are you? Yeah, so it's kind of, it's an odd world again, and it's a sign of the spirit running through people, because I do think these jesters in the other realm, and they're quite literally described as jesters, through people who take things like dimethyltryptamine and traverse the astral planes. You know, they meet these manically laughing, wide grinning clowns in these spaces because they are interacting with the serpentine hybrid feathered fish bird gods hybrids of the antediluvian age, you know, and they have these natures about them where I think they've lost their minds because they've been trapped in the spirit realm for so long, disembodied. I think they are quite literally become laughing lunatics, and it's a part of their nature to have that hyena laughing. It's like they're not even laughing, they're crying with pain. Just sounds like laughter to us, because there's a very fine line between laughter and crying, you know. Even all the same muscles are used for the process, even with ourselves, and all the same parts of the brain light up when you laugh and when you cry. It's because they're all
Mm.
it's the same thing. It's using the same energy, you know. So
Yeah.
I'll say again, I'll stop there, and
Yeah.
we'll see where
No,
we
I
go.
mean, all of that is exactly sort of like what I'm seeing. And we talk about mass formation psychosis. We talk about MK ultra mind control, done on a
Hmm.
mass basis. And I think, these are the methods that I see being employed or implemented across society. And now, obviously, when TV came on, first it was radio, let's say.
Hmm.
They would have, I remember there was some comedians back in the day. I think they were just on radio, right? And then they started having television. And I think that just sort of spread this kind of visual, and people started copying it, because the more that goes in, you're bound to repeat what you're seeing, especially if you think those people are cool, because it's kind of that magic spell, isn't it? It's kind of
Hmm.
casting into your mind and into your heart, and you're starting to adopt these behaviors. So it's like this process of adoption, especially over generations, because then your parents start behaving like that when, as the generations go along. And so you start just kind of becoming these clowns in a way, like we're almost a society of clowns,
Hmm.
because of the way we've been programmed. And, it's almost like you can't go through a conversation without someone trying to lighten it up with a joke, which
Hmm.
I'm totally fine with, but it's like, why do we feel compelled to be this way? Like it's psychological, right? Like it's a psychosis.
Yeah, in a way, it's burying your head in the sand type of attitude. Why so
Yeah.
serious? You know, as the main quote goes from the Joker of the Batman movies, it's
Yeah.
kind of we're not supposed to point out the problems. We're supposed to just eat our bread and watch our circuses and be happy. You know.
Yeah.
And if you are pointing out the issues, the glaring problems that surround us in society, well, you're a fly in the punch bowl, and they're gonna get rid of you
Right.
very quickly, and they're not going to appreciate you raining on their parade or the circus, shall we say? Is kind of, you've got to kind of conform and put on a smile.
Mm.
And say everything is awesome all the time, or else you are a problem for the most people, because most people aren't psychologically trained in this infantized, arrested development society we live in, where people have the reasoning capacities and the emotional capacities of 5-year-olds, even as adults.
Yeah.
It's kind of, we've been
Yeah.
dumbed down to such a point where it's kind of, they don't even have the capabilities to process just how bad things can actually be and how bad they
Hmm.
actually are. I think that's a testimony to what it means to have some spiritual maturity and to have
Yeah.
a grounding in faith and understanding of God. I think it gives you that ability to process the hard things with a solid
Hmm.
foundation, understanding that God is in control fundamentally. But without that, I think it's like a ship in the middle of a storm, and people don't want to accept that there's no captain there. You know what I mean? It's kind of it's a scary situation to be in. To
Hmm.
realize that we're all living in Satan's little season, absolutely, especially if you haven't got a lifeboat.
Yeah.
So I think, luckily, there are people out there growing rapidly. The Truther movement itself has grown exponentially since I became a member like 10 years ago. I think
Hmm.
more people are, whether you're Christian or not, are becoming very aware that there is a problem, and there are people out there who are evil, doing evil things intentionally with an agenda. And I think it'll all inevitably lead them back to God once they've done the research thoroughly. So I am hopeful that in our time, God is doing a work to bring people closer to Him, just in time when they need it. But it's
Hmm.
it's it's a it's kind of like a spell to be in the
Yeah.
clown in the clown world. There's like different realities going on here, and it depends which one you're kind of clued into. But I think as
Yeah.
long as you're playing their game, as long as you're watching their media, as long as you're voting for their people, as long as you're locked in to their narrative and playing a role on their
Hmm.
stage, you are going to have to put on a mask, and you're going to have to smile, and you're going to have to get
Yeah.
along and go along. But
Yeah.
when people like us who took off the mask and found our true selves under it all in Christ and what we were supposed to be, made in the image of God, I feel like we aren't playing the game anymore. We're not on the stage, and we're
Hmm.
trying our best to get people to come off the stage, and come over here
Yeah.
and get with the reality of the situation. So I'm hopeful. I'm not a
Hmm.
pessimist when it comes to these type of things. I think everybody realizes something's wrong. I think people are getting disillusioned now, thankfully, with the hedonist lifestyle, with the everything is awesome lifestyle, with the abundance dopamine hit lifestyle. I think people are exasperated and are realizing this is not healthy. and are getting a
Yeah.
little bit more serious about things. You know, we'll see. We'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, Madeline. What do you
Yeah,
think? You know?
we are absolutely conjecturing here with a lot of things. I mean, obviously you have a lot more to work on, but I think not to work on, but you have to work with, because you've done all of your research in this way. But like, I remember sort of before I came back to the Lord a few years ago, the last thing I watched was a Jack Black movie. And
Hmm.
it was so irreverent. It was actually blasphemous. And it was like, um, it was just this trip. It was almost like, especially because we were drinking at the same time, see that you're almost on this trip. I can't even remember what the movie was called, but it was the one where Satan is actually coming up and he's like, I think it's Jack Black and his brother. And anyway, um, my daughters never, and they're teenagers, and they never got on board with any of this kind of comedy, which I found really interesting. But over the
Hmm.
years, and you probably find this with kids as well, they almost have an aversion to people who are making stupid faces. Like, why are you being that way? And
Yeah.
so, like, I would be like, oh, watch this movie. It might be Jim Carrey or whatever. And my daughter would just be like, oh, like, I don't get it. Like, that's not funny. And I thought it was weird that she didn't get it. But I was like, well, actually, these people are mocking you, right? They're part of this group called the Mocking Tongue, which I think is a secret society of its own within the whole network of secret societies.
Hmm.
And they do this. They play silly games in your face. Almost like, to me, these are almost like treating you like, it's almost patronizing, isn't it? It's
Oh
like,
yeah.
look at me. I can make a silly face and make you laugh.
Hmm.
And everyone just responds by laughing, you know?
Hmm.
Um, and then there's this guy who, I mean, tell me he's not channeling something.
Well, funnily enough, he is a mimic, or a mime. That's
Yes.
basically what he is. He
Yeah.
mimics people, and is can. That's where his comedy comes from. The ability to take
Mm-hmm.
on the spirit of or the role of another individual that's easily
Mm-hmm.
recognizable. So he does a lot of caricatures of other actors and things like that, and impressions.
Mm-hmm.
Mimicry and miming goes back to Rome. They were called
Mm-hmm.
sanios originally, and mimes and mimics is where you get these words from. And that's what they used to do, exactly what Jim Carrey is doing, and that's how their comedy arose and what they were doing in their shows. So
Mm-hmm.
this is an ancient art, and even then, there was some dodgy stuff going on with all of it. I would say, because
Yeah.
once the official narrative is once Rome collapsed and Christendom took over, actors were seen as filthy, dirty prostitutes who were lying to people and selling themselves out, pretending to be something they're not actually for money.
Mm.
So it was kind of seen as like a dirty profession in a way, which
Mm.
sparked the traveling circus of the commedia dell'arte, which left that
Okay.
region and traveled to other regions to kind of create the kind of the first circus, but it was improvised shows,
Mm-hmm.
pretending to be whatever they could be in front of crowds for money in a hat type of situation.
Mm-hmm.
But here he is on Jim Carrey wearing a mask, and he channels
Literally.
this by putting on a mask. He channels the spirit of Loki, which is the trickster, jokester god, and
Yeah.
obviously that creates his personality in himself, which is there he is like a snake dislocating his jaw, just like the
Yeah.
Nephilim would have had from the dragon serpent parents. The tongue sticking out as well is actually a very common motif in most of these masks worn by these societies who are channeling the same spirits, funnily enough. So to
Oh,
us, it seems like a comedy moment because he's seen a really attractive woman, but symbolically, that's actually
yeah.
bang on to the representations of the masks worn by these cultures. And they're telling you in this
Mm-hmm.
film, costumes and masks are not a joke. Like
Yeah.
when you put on a mask, you are giving yourself over to the representation of that mask. It's a channel to the spirit realm, and something
Mm-hmm.
looks like that mask. That's the spirit you're going to channel. You're evoking it, and you're allowing it. It's an invitation to come into your own body. That's what these
Right.
are.
That's kind
And
of
I
what
think,
he's doing here, right? Like he's actually
yeah,
invoking by putting this mask on.
exactly. And it's an occult practice. It's a well-known occult practice in the West, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also just a Tuesday afternoon for a lot of other countries, like in Africa and India and in the Malaysian areas and some areas of America and South America and Australia. Everywhere all over the earth, they have these cultures that wear masks to channel spirits. It's
Mm-hmm.
specifically to do that, to elect the spirit in their body and let it use their body for whatever it wants. Usually they offer a sacrifice, drink something, smoke something, eat something, have sex with something. I don't know. Whatever it is the spirit wants. And then
Mm-hmm.
they get something from the spirit. It's a transaction, it's a deal.
Yeah.
And these movies like The Mask, which these actors are, like Jim Carrey, are performing, are telling you like what the truth of the matter is, but they're putting it under layers of nuance and comedy, and hiding it behind it's nothing serious, it's just something funny, it's not, don't take this seriously type of attitude. And it's a testimony to the layers of deception we've kind of been under, because we don't think masks are serious in the West. So we think we don't understand what they do to us when we wear them. We don't believe dressing like something is important, or that it matters how you dress or what you wear or what you put on your face. We don't believe in that kind of stuff. That's woo-woo mysticism. It's nonsense. We're predominantly in the West, we are a scientific, rigid, atheistic type system. We are secular. We're not religious. We have a separation of church and state. They have no business telling us what we can and cannot wear or dress on, this type of stuff. But when you know the actual implications of what it means to dress in a certain way, like multicolored clothing, white skin, red lipstick, red hair type of stuff, what you're mimicking there are actually spirits, specific spirits. And we are not the first cultures to be doing that. It's been going on for thousands of years. And I don't think ignorance of the spiritual law makes you immune to the spiritual laws. So whether dressing like that channels the spirit isn't going to stop the spirit from getting into you. And it's all the better for the spirit if you don't know it's there, because then you can't cast it out because it's hidden. It's using you and you don't even realize it. That's perfect, because it'll never be exposed. It'll never get kicked out of the body it wants to stay in so much. Because the problem is with the West, and this is why it has to be hidden, why it has to be occult, is because if we knew the situation, then the demons couldn't use our bodies, because we'd just evoke Christ and cast them out very quickly. But because we have lost that art, that understanding of spiritual warfare, and because we've been trained to believe that it's just something fun for the kids, a clown, or dressing like something or wearing a mask is harmless, the demons get free reign here, but only because it's occulted. But if we knew the truth, they wouldn't last very long, because we're a highly Christianized area of the earth. And we can't remember. Everyone will remember. I think I need Jesus to get this demon out. Everyone would realize it very quickly. I heard something about Jesus casting out demons. You know what I mean? It's kind of, we would very quickly figure it out. But in lots of places on the earth, these demons are openly possessing people. It's not even hidden. The tribe's in on it. They're doing rituals to purposely get this to happen, and they've got witnesses of like 80 members of the tribes, all a part of the ritual, wanting the shaman to be possessed, waiting for it to happen, so they can then ask the demon inside the shaman for stuff, for information, for knowledge. It's kind of, because they're not worried about being cast out, because no one there believes in Christ. They're all worshipping the demons as gods, so the demons feel pretty safe there to manifest quite openly and physically. Being channeled, talking through people, and this type of stuff, and performing miracles in front of people by making the possessed person not be cut by blades or something like that, or not be burnt by fire or something. They do something to prove that they are in the person, and the person is now invincible because the demon's being channeled, just as proof. But they can do that so brazenly in those countries because no one there has Christ to defend themselves against it. But in the West, if they did what they do in these other countries here, someone will stand up, someone will say in the name of Christ, I command you to leave. You have no authority here, get out, and then we have a problem. The demons have a problem. So that's why it has to be occult. That's why it's hidden from us. That's why these secret societies use this against us and do everything they can to mislead us to understand the true spiritual implications of costume and masks, because that's how the demons can operate here freely. In the shadows, right in front of our face, by the way. That's how it works. But it's ignorance that makes us fall victim to these things. Halloween is a good example of the ignorance, for example, that makes us fall victim to these things. Even kids dressing up like demons every year. And again, it's for kids. It's just a bit of fun. It's harmless, but is it? I don't think it really is. The rest of the world wouldn't say it was. So
no, and actually that made me think of something. Jana, my friend from the puzzle picture, and I were talking, and she said, do you think the demons were released when Satan was released? Have you thought about that? I'm sure you have.
I don't think the demons were ever locked up. I don't think it doesn't say anywhere that. It only says that the devil was locked up for 1,000 years during the reign. And obviously tribulation, we know locusts were released from the pit, with Abaddon and
Mhm.
Apollyon, which may have been a reference to some of the angels like Samyaza or Azazel that were chained up for creating the Nephilim to begin with. Maybe they were released for Armageddon in some way. But when it comes to the demons, I don't feel like the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim went anywhere. I think they've been stuck here on Earth in the spirit realm disembodied since they became disembodied, and I think they have their own issue. They'll be dealt with the lake of fire at the end of time when the new heaven and earth is created. They'll kind of be purged from creation in a way, which I think is another good reason why we need a new heaven and earth. I consider the demonic infestation like a parasite in our creation. It's like a ghost in the machine. And the only way to get rid of it is by fire. And I think that's why God needs a new heaven and earth, because this current one is corrupt. And what do we mean by that? I think it means it's infested with parasites, which are the demons, which are in the spirit realm. And people don't understand, like, the astral realm and the physical realm are not two different places. We only perceive it that way because of our limited perceptions. It is the earth. The astral realm is just as much the earth as the physical realm we live in is the earth. They're one of the same thing. The two sides of the same coin. They're not separate from one another. They aren't actually separated. Our perception of that part of reality has just been limited, so we don't understand that or traditionally see it anymore. So I think when they were limited from our perceptions after the flood, this is my working theory, when the rainbow was given to us as a covenant, I mean, rainbows didn't exist prior to that, which tells me we didn't perceive simply the light spectrum of the rainbow. We perceived probably more, and we were probably limited after the flood, so we can't see the demons. So they can't influence us like they were when they were walking around freely. But I still think they've been there the entire time. But during a millennial reign, they had zero influence. Maybe they had influences in the dry places, in the desert places where people were rebelling, and where drought was suffered as a result, as it's told to us. And I think the demons were in the dry places, throughout the millennial reign in a very literal sense. They congregated more so where they were welcome, which was probably in these tribes which were not bowing the knee to Christ during his reign. And I think we still see remnants of them and the cultures that were developed worshipping them still today after the reign, in these isolated places all over the place, like the cannibalistic tribes of Papua New Guinea, for example, or the Rakshasa worshipping Hindus, or the Bali, the island of gods, as it's known, which is just full of Rakshasa demon representations and dragons all over the place. We've got China, the land of the dragon. I think when the millennial reign was in its full swing, I think there were nations on Earth that weren't fully on board, and I think the demons were likely there manifesting in those places still, albeit in a lessened capacity and not really, and losing influence day by day because Christ was reigning supreme and spreading like wildfire. And I think they may have had a moment of time where they were just left in the spirit realm and no one was contacting them anymore or attempting to get in touch with them anymore. And maybe they didn't like that. But when the little season began, gateways were definitely being opened again, more so than ever with the rise of the occults and secret societies. I feel like the people began to rediscover ways to get in touch with them. And then here we are today, full clown world again,
Yeah. I mean, when Jesus was walking the earth, they were terrified of him. So imagine now he's got rid of the prince of this world, Satan, and cast down all of the principalities and powers. They probably just scurried off, right? As you say, to the dry places and to where people actually wanted them to be, engaging with them. And I guess those people have always been rebels. They always will be rebels. They will never bow the knee to Jesus. And they'll only ever get out of life what you sow is what you reap, and that's what they're getting. Not eternal life. So
I mean the demons are loving it now because more than ever they have like more people dressing like clowns than ever, which is channeling them more than ever. And there's been a concerted agenda especially in the Western occulted world to push the clown on the people because they want people dressing like clowns. So there's always going to be a It reboot or a new clown serial killer movie franchise or a slasher house franchise. There's always going to be a new Joker reboot at some point because they get people to dress like them at Halloween. Like they rebooted The Crow, for example, which is the exact same costume. They call it corpse makeup, but it's the same thing. It represents the same thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, the more people can get dressing that way, the more idols they can create that dress that way. The more channels they open. But like I said, during Christ's reign, when he was on the earth, and obviously prior to that, when Christians understood like dressing this way is serious, it's not a joke, and you shouldn't be doing it, and that's why actors were basically outlawed, because it's kind of like, don't pretend to be something you're not. You don't really know what you're channeling. You don't know what you're playing with there. I
Right.
mean, I saw recently, was it the VMA Awards or some nonsense? I don't know. I only see what social media posts after the fact or something like that. But out
Yeah.
of nowhere, suddenly now there's some famous woman called Chapel Roan or something like that.
Oh,
And she's just
never heard of her.
she's like the flavor of the month new artist on the scene that everyone suddenly loves for no reason. I've never even heard of her until literally like a week ago. But apparently we should all love this woman, and she's wonderful. She's the greatest thing ever, and everyone knows who she is. Of course you do. It's kind of like, why wouldn't you know who she is? She was on the VMAs, don't you know? It's kind of, she's a nobody. She's been put there on purpose because she looks like a clown. And I mean that.
Okay.
She has white
Wow.
face, red lipstick, bright red hair, multicolored clothes. She's basically David Bowie, Iggy Stardust 2.0, She's Lady
Hmm.
Gaga 3.0. I don't know. This just goes one after the other, each generation after the other. But she even tells you what she is. I am dressing like a clown because I'm LGBTQAI plus whatever. It's kind of,
Hmm.
all the boys used to make fun of me saying, "Oh, why do gay people like always look like clowns? You're just clowns. You always end up looking like a clown." She's like, "Well, if that's what they think of me, then I'm going to become the ultimate clown." So she dresses like a clown, as like a middle finger to these people who used to say LGBTQ people always make themselves look like clowns. It's kind of like, what a useless story to cover up the fact. It's kind of, I'm going to be rebellious by proving them right. Do you get what I
Right.
mean? It's kind of, it's
Yeah.
just childish, stupid logic. And she probably doesn't
Yeah.
even realize it, but we wrestle not against flesh and blood at the end of the day. There are spiritual
Yeah.
forces at work here. And now she's an
Hmm.
idol, which people emulate because she's been put
Hmm.
in the spotlight. She's been chosen by the people who run the industry, which are Freemasons, because they too know the secret. It's kind of, it's not, she's not a good musician. Anyone could
Yeah. They
sing the
never
song
are.
she's sung. She's been chosen because she's dressed like a psychedelic clown monster. And they want more
Right.
people looking like that in the spotlight, because then you create an idol which people emulate. And the
Yeah.
more people can get copying these clown idols, the more channels get opened, the more demons are coming into our realm, interacting physically with us.
Yeah.
It's just basic math, and it's just a very basic system. And they've been playing it probably since, I don't know, since the time immemorial, but since the TV, the advent of television, I would say,
Yeah.
and music videos, especially, the 60s onwards.
Well, the elites have always been obsessed with that kind of, let's say, cosplay. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but
Yeah.
they seem to have always been kind of down that alley in terms of their preferences for entertainment and whatever that means to
Mm.
them. I don't really know, but I think like we have, I'm just going to share some pictures here of the elite masquerades.
Is it the
And
Rothschild Masquerade or something? Is it Rothschild?
yeah,
Yeah, I remember these.
so these types, right? Because they just love to dress up. And I do think it has to do something with like, I can be whoever I want to be, and I'll make you see something that's not the real me, or at least I'm hiding behind a persona. And it's all really
Hmm.
basic, but it is a trick, isn't it? It's like the eye gate that the Bible talks about is such a powerful thing to protect, because this is chaos. Like you see a human with like a bird face or some kind of weird big head. And it's a little bit terrifying at the same time as being like bold and brazen and in your face. And you're almost forced to cope with it. You're like, well, your brain doesn't really know what to do with this information. Um, so you almost disassociate. And this is where I think comedy comes in, is that it's a very powerful disassociation tool. And so when I talk about comedy, I'm kind of also referring to like the whole jester thing, making it playful, making something sober
Hmm.
into something, ridiculous, so that people laugh at it. And it is a disassociation. Um, but like the whole thing about covering your face, I mean, it's the ultimate lie, isn't it? It's like, you can't see me. I can do whatever I want. It's like when you play with a child, you're like, oh, you can't see me.
Hmm.
And,
Anonymity is dangerous psychologically. It messes with people. People do not behave
mm,
the same when they have a mask on. It's
Yeah.
very well Western documented psychology. Obviously, there's a huge spiritual component to why that's the case, which I'm trying to explain here. But even science knows, the scientific community understand that wearing a mask makes people more predisposition to do things they wouldn't ordinarily do without the mask. They will behave in ways that are completely contrary to their usual nature because they feel emboldened to do so thanks to the anonymity the mask provides. And it's kind of the worst tendencies usually come out when they put the mask on. This is the other thing as well. I mean, there's a culture called, well, there's a ritual known as the Curatos, which is in Portugal. And they do this every year around Lent, just before the period of fasting, the 40 days of fasting. And it's been like Catholicized, but it's basically based on the Thracian cookery traditions of the wild man from Bulgaria. That's kind of, but this goes way back to Dionysus and the Thracian cultures of that region just north of so particularly like Romania, Bulgaria, that area. This is where you get gods like Dionysus from back in the early periods, the Hellenistic periods, the Greek periods, the Roman, that early era of human history. They had this area of Eastern Europe which created something called the wild man tradition, based on Dionysus, who started a wild party with his maenads and fauns, and went from village to village, inscripting more people under his spell, and they had this wild orgiastic drinking drug-fueled party where the people who joined him would transform into satyrs and fauns and serpent maenads and like half human hybrid creatures, animalistic creatures, and that's where you get the wild man tradition from, which spread out. But the wild man is actually a direct representation of Nephilim, basically, because it's a giant man-eating monster with a club. It's basically just a giant of Europe. But they were particularly hairy in Europe, it seems, probably because it's colder. I assume they acclimatized and adapted and either wore furs or were covered in fur. It's one of the two. I don't really know, but they were also very colorful creatures because the people that wear these costumes to represent the wild man are very colorful. Tassels all over the multicolored tassels, bells, very noisy creatures, and they always wear these masks that are like big grins or horns. And I think like Krampus is a very more devilish example of this, but traditionally they're actually very colorful creatures, not so dark, because the Nephilim had those features. These colorful creatures had these wide grins and bulging eyes and colorful patterns all over the fur and skin. But in Portugal, which is connected to the mainland Europe, so it follows through the Celtic traditions, going all the way to the Thracian cultures at the other side of Eastern Europe. But at the end of Portugal, they have something called the Curatos, which is like an echo of this same tradition. And again, it's been Catholicized, which tends to what happens to these cultures. They try and make them something to do with Christianity, but it's a pagan ritual through and through, And basically, all the men of the village of this one particular area, once a year, dress like a demon, and they dress in the wild man garb, multicolored. It's like red, yellow, green striped tassels with a stick, so the club, And they have the mask on, which has like black lines all over the face, but like a red pointed nose mask, and they go around the village causing chaos, knocking on people's doors, ringing bells all over the place, and like picking up women and stuff like this. It's a very sexually charged ritual. But they will tell you, we feel possessed. We're supposed to represent the devil, and we definitely lose ourselves when we do it. That's what they're telling you, and
wow,
this is like in the West. This is not like in like somewhere like these other traditions in like Eastern cultures and maybe like South America and parts of North America where they're channeling ancestor spirits. They don't really know they're doing that, but they'll tell you, yeah, we lose ourselves and the stuff we get up to is insane. Like we just we don't behave how we normally behave all year round. But as soon as we put on this costume, the village is just havoc. Absolute havoc gets wreaked everywhere, But they do it every year. It's like a rite of passage for young boys. Like they have to do it, If you haven't done it, you're not really a member of our village, because it's our tradition. And you ask them why they do it, and they say, we don't really know. It's just tradition.
Yeah.
We just do. We just
That's
do it. It's what we do every year. I don't know why, but I'm not going to stop because my father did it, my grandfather did it, and his father's father did it, But when you get to brass tacks and you ask them, like, why do you do this? And they'll tell you, we don't know. It's just tradition. But I've discovered why they do it. It goes way back to basically Nephilim worship at its core, and that's what it is. And people don't like me painting that broad brush about the special little rituals. You know what I mean? But the truth is, they're not special. It's not unique. It's actually earth-wide. They're all doing it in their own unique, aesthetical, stylized way. But fundamentally, it's the same thing. It's the same ritual, and it's the same creatures. You know. So I'm sorry, but the special little pagan rituals are not special. They're not. They're not unique. They're not unique at all. Far from it. They just think it is because they haven't gone outside their own little bubble of world to realize that they're doing. It's just more of the same. You know, and obviously Christ, his religion, and his kingdom goes completely against this.
I mean, that's really interesting information, and there's usually substances involved too, right? Like they've obviously been taking something, and before they get to that state where they're, I guess, channeling and empowered by these spirits. But I also think that this irreverence that came into the political, socio-political sphere seems to have happened, I would say, at the end of the millennial reign. So that wane of the reign kind of effect where things just went debauched, like things just lost tether to any kind of sobriety. And we had a widespread sort of liberty cult that was growing through this. They realized, oh, hey, we don't have to obey God anymore. He's now no longer present and Satan's back, so we can have as much fun as we want, maybe something like that.
Like a teenager who goes to college for the first time after having strict parents, and they just absolutely lose it. Something like that. Yeah. So go ahead.
That's what I see. So we go through, you go through all of this, and you just see the jester, and then it becomes about vanity, and it becomes about, say, fashion. So more of this fashion element is now becoming a big deal. And as I mean, it just seems like those demons just came back with a vengeance, just from everything we can see, obviously.
Well, they even had the ears of the kings, didn't they? You know, everyone had a court jester, and again, I don't know fully if they fully understood what they were doing necessarily, or if it was just the spirits making these things happen to solidify their influence over power and people, so they influenced people to dress this way to strengthen connections, and the people were none the wiser to what the stuff they were doing. It's just a bit of fun, I'm having a laugh, I'm just being funny. The most sinister of things, if that's the case, hidden behind something so innocuous as laughter and fun, it's kind of dark, and you'll find a lot of the jesters and clowns throughout history are the saddest people. They have had the worst lives. Like even the father of modern clowning, Joseph Grimaldi, he had a horrible life, like a really, really, really horrible life. But he's said to be the funniest man to ever exist, But he was abused hideously by his father. His mother died when he was very young. He was raised with his brother and his father. His father would play psychological mind games, like pretending to be dead, just to see how his kids would react. He beat his younger child right in front of Grimaldi because the younger child was happy his father was dead and said, "Who gets the clock then?" And it's kind of, but Joseph knew his father well enough to say, "This is a trick. Just pretend to be sad." You know what I mean? It's kind of, the little boy didn't know. It's things like that, and then when his father did die, and by the way, his father was a lunatic who demanded that his head be decapitated after he died because he was terrified of waking up in a coffin. And he made his son and witnesses see that happen after his death to prove with witnesses that it was done. It's kind of very odd. And then he grew up in servitude to the stage because he only ever knew the stage because of his father being a very famous actor himself. From Italy, and also he was the dentist of Queen Charlotte when he first came to England, which is very odd. So there's royal connections there with the origin of the first clown as well, which is very weird. But
to dentistry.
It's a dentistry of all things. And then he dropped it when he came to England and stopped being Queen Charlotte's dentist and became a stage performer and teacher of people on these places like the Royal Theatre in London and Sadler's Wells Theatre. So he took up back because even his father was a very famous trapeze artist who's famous for hanging off a chandelier in this French hall and entertaining like Russian diplomats. It's really odd stories. He was, I think, I can't remember his name. It's something like Spring Legs, or Iron Legs, or something like that was his nickname, because he could jump from major heights and not break his legs or something. but it was always in the family. And then when Joseph Grimaldi comes around in like the 1700s, the 1770s, 1780s time period when he was born and growing up, he again beaten by his father, forced to work on stage as a young child, knew no other life. And then he married a young woman who was the daughter of the man who owned the theatre. She got pregnant. He was married. They were happy. She dies at childbirth and the child dies. He loses his mind. He goes insane. And while he's in his drunken stupor, he shoots himself in the foot with a prop gun and ends up like in serious agony and pain with that for months, where he's kind of nursed back together by this particular woman who was like the daughter of another stagehand's friend. And then he marries her because feels like he needs to give her something back to say thanks, but he didn't really love her anyway. And that's always how it's kind of seemed in the memoirs. And she was just happy to be around, so she kind of went along with it herself. They had a son together. Joseph trained him and did the same thing with him, but his son was a blind drunk who always getting into fights and a serious alcoholic, and he died. So he saw his two children die before he did, and then his brother came back into his life randomly at one point for one night only, and then disappeared forever. And it's assumed that he was murdered because he was brandishing around a bunch of money, and people saw him and then killed him, basically. So, and then honestly, the story's horrible. And then after obviously his son dies, all these type of things. Then his wife dies of, I think she gets like dementia or something, and then slowly passes away. He can't perform anymore because of his entire life being in the industry. He has crippling arthritis in every single joint of his body, and he's in complete agony 24/7 until his death. He inherited a load of money from his father, but his father's friend promised to invest it, stole all the money. So he lost everything all the time. He was always poor. He was always going through pain and misery up until the very end. He died penniless and alone and in complete agony. He was the funniest, greatest clown to ever exist in human history, and has been called the father of modern clowning. And his life was horrible. All the way from end to finish. It was just one tragedy after another. And he was a nice guy. He was naive. He was just naive and played by people around him, And it's sad. It's just sadness. And you have to wonder, could this be the consequence of dressing that way?
Right.
You have to wonder why the sad clown is such a stereotype. It's because you're playing with fire when you put on that costume. You don't realize what you're inviting into your life. It's not a joke how you dress. It really isn't. But his standard of dress, which he was, by the way, he was dressed that way by a Freemason who had copied the Rakshasa demons of India and just dressed this actor like it on the British stage. And it's kind of, you dress like a demon, you channel a demon, whether you know it or not. And if you start seeing your life going in a terrible direction, you need to start looking at the things in your life and, are you making channels to the spirit realm through whatever means? And it might not just be the way you dress. You can do it through idols, posters, music, anything really. You have to look into it, really. Art is a dangerous tool. Art is magic at the end of the day. Yes. So you need to be careful with what you bring into your life, Very careful. So okay, anyway, I do ramble. Madeline, take the ball. Keep going.
No, not at all. That's why I got you here. So it'd be weird if you didn't talk. So I think it seems to me that a lot of the stories of these people are actually, these people are being preyed on in the first sense, and they're given something. So they're given attention. Maybe they never got attention. They're kind of maybe coming from extreme poverty. And so this gives them a chance to do something with their lives that might bring them more. But at the end of the day, like you said, they shouldn't do it, and they probably do know better because of all, throughout all of time since Jesus, everyone has known about Jesus. Everybody has known about the gospel. So it just seems to me that they continue to do this, and it is a self kind of indulgent thing at the end of the day. Despite why you're doing it to get attention. You're entertaining, you love what you do, whatever it might be, and then the consequences follow of that lifestyle. as you say, they kind of end up being the most miserable people of all, unfortunately, and to their detriment. And yeah, I guess they're quite grotesque, you know, and just the way that they behave and things like that. But to your point, I think you were mentioning about um, how they ended up sort of being in the courts, right? So getting the ears of the king, and that it does seem like, you know, you've got your Royal Society balls and things like that where they perform, and they do this specifically for the royal family. And I don't know, there's just something weird about that, that this combination exists when you think, okay, you're kings and queens, you're supposed to be leading countries, but you're horsing around with these like mad kind of mad hatters, and I don't know, introducing this kind of irreverence into that political sphere. Like, what are you doing? Why are you combining these things? It's strange.
Is it any different than leaders of tribes being really close with the shamans because the shaman has a direct line to the spirit realm? Do you get what I mean? Is this just the Western version of that? Our leaders keep a clown around because that's the shaman channeling to the spirit realm. You know, it's when you take those models and you apply them to other cultures, we can see the pattern. It actually exists, and the answers are in these other cultures who know what they're doing and don't lie about it. But for us, it's just a bit of fun. Oh, the royal family goes and sees a circus performance and talks to the clowns. Isn't that funny and honest, you know, and wholesome? And that's the lie. That's what it's covered up under. And you do have to wonder why every king had a jester. You know, and our jesters, you know, themselves, the reason they dress that way is because it copies the king. They're wearing a floppy crown, you know, a regal garments, and have their own scepter, but it usually has a bladder on the end of it to bop people with, and it's silly, you know, and they're basically mocking the king in a sense by mimicking the way a king dresses. But you'll find as time went on, the costume stopped being so king-like and developed this Harlequin-esque style, with obviously the diamond shapes there, as you had in that last picture, and these, and I think that was picked up because of the popularization of that movement I mentioned earlier, the Commedia dell'arte, and Harlequin was a later addition to this, and that's when the jester began to change his visage to kind of mimic something more familiar that people would recognize from stage shows as the comedy factor, which was Harlequin and clown, you know. So I think the jester took on more of that Harlequin-esque style as the years went on, because people would recognize it as the funny man. But originally, jesters were just dressing like the king, you know, and they were comedians. They were just comedians. They weren't necessarily clowns. They were just people who knew how to tell a joke and how to make light of situations, and kings appreciated that. Because remember as well, it was a commodity at the time for a king to have a jester, because actors were out of work and frowned upon and seen as prostitutes, and they weren't being hired, and you know, it was kind of frowned upon position to have. But if you were a king, who's going to say no to the king? And the king could hire these people and put them back into work, but as a personal funny man, you know. My jester, you know, he's for me only, and me myself. And I think it became like popular for like royalty and people of affluence to have their own jester. It's like a sign of power and influence, you know, because they're the only people allowed to have an actor around, you know, because it was, again, frowned upon. So I think that's what it really became about. Originally, the kings got them into the courts because they saw it as a symbol of power and a symbol of authority, and I can afford to pay somebody to make me laugh, type of thing. And if you didn't have your own jester, are you even a king? You know, it's that type of thing. But then as time went on, that jester turned, because he's already channeling this idea of irreverence for authority, you know, laughing at the king, that type of thing. They were already embodying, in a sense, something demonic, in a sense, you know. I think the costume changed with that spirit and became more clown-like because they were channeling the spirits of entities that looked like clowns. And it's kind of like, does art mimic reality, or does reality mimic art situation? I think there's a bleed through, and slowly but surely the jester started to look more and more like a clown. And I think as that went on, you know, you realize jesters had huge influence over the king's opinions over many matters as time went on. And kings began to consider the court jester as a confidant and a mouthpiece for the king, rather than an enemy of the king, you know. And they became basically friends, you'll find, most of the time, rather than something. And so the king took the advice of the jester quite a lot. You know, he ended up being like that. And you have to wonder, subtly, spiritually speaking, how that became the case. And Is it an accident when you then consider, in light of my own research, probably not. I think the demons found a way to get the ears of kings slowly but surely. They played the long con, and they got in there one way or the other. And like I said, Harlequin, who a lot of these jesters are modeled after, is a representation of the Wild Man of Europe. That's where they got it from. They copied the Wild Man of Europe traditions and created a character called Harlequin. So Harlequin is literally a representation of demons. And then when the jesters start dressing that way, then yeah, they're going to start channeling demons. And when you're in the royal court, you now have influence. So it all goes hand in hand. It's just one disaster after another. And like I said, this slow degradation into irreverence and nonsense, which we see the wane of the reign, as it's described, kind of brought, which I think is a great phrase, by the way. I really like that.
Yeah, I do. That's Jana's, but yeah, I like it too. Yeah, and I think like the early influencers, right? And they do have that, and even today, so we see that combination, and often comedy is mixed with music, right? So you've got this jester theme, and it's infused into music, probably more so now than ever before. So you had the originals, like probably not the originals, but David Bowie, you've Gaga and this other lady you've just mentioned. And they combine the clown with the music, and everybody wants to hear what they have to say on like political issues all of a sudden. Like, why would we take their advice on anything? It's a phenomenon, but it's obviously a magic spell. And I mean, I tend to think that a true politician, let's just, like in the ideal sense of the word, would not even consider for 2 seconds what any of those people have to say. But we live in a weird culture. We live in a clown culture, as often we say. And so I think that's just indicative of the fact that they are taking all of this advice from clowns, essentially. And they probably have been throughout this little season.
I think one of the major issues with the little season is that spiritual concepts have been psychologized. Is that the word? Psychologically bent? I don't know how to phrase that exactly, but people have turned spiritual principles into psychological phenomena instead. And people now think, thanks to the work of people like Jung, that a jester is simply a collective archetypical symbol of human consciousness. So humanity over thousands of years has molded together something that we call a jester in our minds, and that's where it comes from. And it's a cry from the depths of the human psyche to create something that doesn't take life so seriously and shows us a mirror up to ourselves of our dark side. And people say you need to integrate your inner jester in order to kind of be at peace with your dark side. So you integrate the inner shadow by I don't know, creating a relationship with your inner jester or something like that. But basically it's just a fancy nonsensical word salad way of saying be friends with demons, bro, trust me, and that's basically it's kind of, those aren't demons you're interacting with on DMT. You're tapping into the collective conscious of humanity, and the jester is just an archetypical symbol representing the shadow of humanity, and you need to integrate that into yourself to become a higher person and live on a higher plane of consciousness. It's like, what a load of absolute nonsense, like with a G in front of it. It's kind of, these are the disembodied spirits of Nephilim demons that were alive on the earth at one point, and we have the documented history to prove it. They're not some reflection of our collective inner human psyche, but that's how we perceive these type of things. So, when people are dressing like jesters today, they think they're being really deep. They think they're doing something really profound, and it's kind of like the jester in society has been held up on a pedestal by a lot of people today as we need the jesters and the jokers and the comedians in society because they're the ones that hold us a mirror up to ourselves and help us develop and understand where we need to change by laughing at our foibles and our insecurities and our silly ways of interacting with reality. If the jester doesn't exist, how would we humble ourselves, and how would we change and learn where we need to change and what is silly and what's not with our behaviors? And it's kind of this psychological, like this, they've found a way to make it all psychology rather than spiritual in nature. But the truth is, wherever a clown or jester manifests, it's strictly the Nephilim. And it's the same old trick, it's what they're doing with the Pleiades and the Ascended Masters and all this type of thing. They're just telling people what they'll believe they are
Yeah.
It's a lie, you know. It's like, oh yeah, no, we're just aliens from the Pleiades, or oh, we're just ascended
Yeah.
masters from the fifth dimension. Oh, we're time travelers from the future. And then for the psychological scientific people, it's like, oh, they're just a symbol of the collective consciousness of humanity. You know, it's
Yeah.
kind of they have an excuse for everybody to explain them away, but the Bible makes it very clear. Biblical history makes it very clear where these things came from. And then you
Yeah.
look around at the earth and look at these ancestor spirit worship cultures, and you can see exactly what they look like. You know, and they look like this. Like they look
Yeah.
terrifying. Absolutely like what you see on the screen there. They look nuts. Because they are a hybrid between serpentine, seraphim angels, and possibly fish angels, bird angels, colorful insectoid angels of some kinds mixing with humans. And you get
Hmm.
this crazy look, you know, this clown-like look.
I mean,
Um,
imagine holding a circus show full of clowns in somewhere that purports itself to be a
hmm.
holy place. You know, it is really, it just tells you everything that you need to know about this establishment, you know.
hmm Oh yeah, I
It's
actually saw
crazy.
a TikTok video on Instagram. My Instagram feed, by the way, is terrifying. I don't know what I did to deserve that algorithm, but it shows me nothing but the lunatics of the world
Oh
dressing
God.
like clowns, and it's my
Oh,
own fault, you know. But I
yeah.
really see demonic manifestations on a daily basis through my Instagram, and then it came up with like clown church, and it's a bunch of clowns in a
Ah,
church in England putting on like performances and silly things and stuff like that. And do you know why they do that? They do it every year to celebrate Joseph Grimaldi, that clown I was telling you about earlier,
wow.
um, the father of modern clowning. But they always put on this performance in a church every year, and it's kind
I
of,
have seen that. Did you show that
you
on
know.
your show once? I feel like
I don't think I've
I've
ever
seen
shown
that
stuff like that
somewhere.
on the show. I may have mentioned it in the
Okay.
book. I don't know, but it's people have always told me about it. But it's just those
Mm,
silly things that you see around that kind of just little hints towards why a church, why the Vatican, you know, why it's kind of
exactly.
it's a message, isn't it? It's like we are in these places, you know, they're not what you think they are. It's kind of, and if we're in the
Yeah.
little season, then yeah, most of these institutions are severely flawed, you know, and they've got issues,
Very.
and the members may be led astray and might be sincere, but the leadership and the spiritual forces behind a lot of these places has now been brought into question massively, you know. And when you
Hmm.
see things like this manifest, you have to wonder. Because, like I said, what's going on in the physical reflects what's going on in the spiritual, and vice versa. If
Yeah.
you're feeling that that's what's supposed to be a holy place of God with icons that represent
Allegedly.
demons, you know, what's the impact of something like that? You have to wonder, because
Yeah.
it's letting them in. It's a willingness
Yeah.
to let them in, you know, and we don't see it with our eyes because it's a spiritual thing, but this is a physical manifestation of that spiritual issue, you know.
Yeah. And I mean, we see throughout, I guess, television history. I guess one of my favorite movies was actually The Life of Brian. And I mean, it was hilarious, but so irreverent. And it actually took its shot straight at the story of Jesus. And so, you know, the fact that it was absolutely hilarious. I mean, you can't almost not help but laugh. Uh, but it's really coercive and manipulative to get you. And this is a theme that is in a lot of my videos that I do, which is consent. And that idea of consent being what is a spiritual legal requirement to progress with certain things. So the consent of the governed would be one of it, where you have voting system, which isn't true voting because they've selected the candidates, but they give you this illusion of choice. And when everyone plays along, everyone consents, they can carry on almost like legally because they have actually got everyone to go along with it. So therefore, you can carry on and do what you want to do. And
Mm-hmm.
I think clapping would be one thing, but lots of ceremony type of things are similar to that, and laughing. And I think that when we laugh, our guard is down, so we're disarmed from any kind of critical thinking that we might have about seeing something, as well as we are actually approving. So if you think of a smile and a laugh as maybe being recognized as a spiritual approval of something, and so you're seeing terrible things happen. I was explaining to my daughter, like, you know, you could have something like the scary, what is it, the scary movie, Scream,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like comedy mixed with horror. And I know this is like more of a niche genre that a lot of people like, but it's terrifying, because what you're doing is you're finding it hilarious to watch people be brutally murdered.
Mm-hmm.
And like, how do we spiritually accept that kind of a thing in our eye gate? You know, we're told to guard our eye gate, our ear gate. And I think there's reasons for that. You know, I think spiritually there is something that happens when you laugh along with something that goes against God, or that
Oh
is
yeah.
blasphemous, for example. So those are the kinds of things that I've been noticing just in my past. You know,
Mm-hmm.
when I wasn't following the Lord, those are the things I really took, like, I reveled in. It was just like, there was, obviously there was like limits, but in terms of what was funny, the bar was a lot lower.
Well, maybe the Puritans had it right all along. Maybe we're just not supposed to watch anything like that or be involved in the world whatsoever. You
Possibly.
know, or the Amish even. You
Yeah.
know, it's kind of and there is we're laughing now even, but it's maybe they're right. You know, there's a reason why we shouldn't be paying attention to anything of the world, because it seems like Hollywood's aim is to make us laugh at things we shouldn't really be laughing at.
Yeah.
And that again, spiritually, what is that? You know, like I say, it's tacit consent, isn't it, to the horrible things of life? It's an agreement we're kind of making that, yeah, you know, it may be bad, but I'll allow it. You know, in a sense, like without actually saying it, it's like we're agreeing to a contract without realizing we're agreeing to a contract, and
Mm-hmm.
these things matter, especially in the spiritual world. You know, and I don't think people realize that contracts are always being made, and it's that age old understanding that, you know, you have to invite the vampire in for it to have any to come into your house, into your home. And symbolically speaking, that's allowing a demon into your body. It's the same thing. You have to allow
Yeah.
them in. You have to open a door in some way. And it's why, as believers, you know, when we do become born again and cast out the demons and are filled with the Holy Spirit, it's up to us to guard that door. We have to keep it shut. We have to make sure we don't open it again, you know. And I'm not saying you'll lose your salvation or anything, but these things will make war with you. They'll cause problems, you know, and they're in conflict with the Holy Spirit at all times. So it's kind of, you have to know what you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And especially woe to those who don't have the Holy Spirit, you know, because maybe they can cast out a demon, or someone can cast a demon out of them in the name of Jesus, you know, but that demon will come right back if that door's left open.
Yeah.
And that is, like you said, doing things like tacitly consenting in ways that you don't really realize half the time, because you don't think there's much to it. You know, is it wrong to laugh? That type of stuff. How can it be bad to have a, you know, to laugh at the terrible things of life rather than go along with them? And again, I'm
Yeah.
not like, I'm not trying to be like a stick in the mud for people. You know, I'm not saying we can't have joy and laughter and humor, but you have to wonder, if you're laughing at sick jokes about people dying, it's kind of, you have to wonder what kind of spirit's behind that at the end of the day. Is that of God?
Yeah.
Is that really you that finds that funny, or is it something else inside of you? Maybe you have to wonder, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't believe in a spirit realm, then you're probably not even going to think any of that's relevant. And people might be identifying with their demons' likes and lusts and desires and humor, thinking it's their own. And that's kind of the sad world we live in, in a way. But
Yeah.
I think these conversations are useful. I think more and more
Mm-hmm.
people today are kind of realizing there's a spiritual element to reality, and I think they're kind of searching for those answers in places like this, because I think the secular view that it's all just matter and nothing matters isn't really working anymore. And I don't think
Yeah.
there's anybody alive today that hasn't had an encounter with demons. They might not admit it. They might not want to seem crazy. You know, they might never open and never mention it, but I bet they have. I bet everybody has. And conversations like this speak to people, all people, because like I said, we've all been touched by malevolence in a spiritual way. We've all
Yeah.
been had encounters with these things one way or the other. And interesting times, very
Yeah.
interesting times, honestly.
They're so sneaky, the demons, and you know, these entities that want access to your life. They'll come in any way they can, and if they can get you by disarming you, making you laugh at something so that you just go along. I know enough about consent to know that there's implicit consent and explicit consent. So, you know, if you are just going along with things, that is considered by participation. So if you participate in something, you are in effect consenting to it. You don't have to say yes or no, um, but you are. and that's just a fact, like you don't speak up, you don't say, actually, this is wrong, I'm leaving. So those kinds of things, you are implicitly consenting. And I think that's a really important thing, especially in little season, for Christians to realize, is like, I don't want to say apathy is consent, but I think there's a fine line between participation and just not doing anything about the things that are wrong. And I think faith is active. This is something that else is coming to me, like faith in Jesus. We follow the examples of Abraham and Moses and those people named in Hebrews 11, where we're told that these people lived their lives by faith. They weren't just kind of like airy-fairy believing something. It was actual, putting your hand to something, speaking, whatever it was that God gave you to do. That is how you act in faith. That is your life of faith. And I think it's really important that action is consent to God. If you're acting in the kingdom and you're acting towards the benefit of the kingdom, you are actually acting in faith, and that is building something. As opposed to, I think a lot of people just kind of recess, almost like Homer into the hedge. It's like, I just don't want to do anything about anything that's going on right now because I don't know what to do. And that's fair. Sometimes you do have to wait on the Lord to show you what is it that you're meant to be doing in your life in these situations. How do you respond? It's awkward. People call you like a pearl clutcher. They'll have all kinds of names for you if you don't go along with like the comedy of the day, which is very irreverent and very blasphemous towards God. So I think, I want to really encourage people to live your life of faith as an active participation in the kingdom, as opposed to passively participating in the things of this world. I think that's the difference I'm trying to talk about here. And just like, and that could be said for a lot of things. We might talk about music, we might talk about the acting, we might talk about lots of different displays of the satanic agenda that's been forced into our lives since the day we were born, actually. But yeah, I think just the clown theme, the jester theme, and kind of the deeper meanings behind it all has been really interesting for me to hear more about. And yeah, I mean, is there anything else you wanted to provide in terms of understanding this?
Well, I think I kind of explained it in a recent video. I think I made a video explaining how we kind of need to be careful about how we present ourselves if we're going to be ambassadors for the little season theory, because eyes are on us now because this is spreading like wildfire. And as I kind of explained how the whole point of the conspiracy, it seems, the whole reason secret societies are around is to cover up this point that Christ has already been here. I mean, there's no greater conspiracy to cover up if that's the case. That is the conspiracy, and it's kind of the way they do it is by distracting us. That's all they can do. And they described it as kind of like, so you clean the house quickly, but you don't have time to clean the house. So you quickly just shove everything in a cupboard. Or you put everything in the comedy, like cartoon, sweep everything under the rug. But there's just this mountain. This is like a huge lump, as tall as you, of just stuff underneath this rug. It's all peeking out the bottom. Or like the cupboard doors, like just falling open. You're trying to keep everything there while they're talking to you, And it's kind of the whole job is just to make sure you don't look in that cupboard. And you don't question that that mountainous rug there that clearly has a lot of crap under it, And it's kind of, and I think that's all they can do because they can't really cover up the rain very well. They've done a good job, the best they can, but there's still a lot of evidence everywhere, and all they can really do is just make sure we're not looking at it. So the whole game of Hollywood and entertainment and the world, the clown world we live in, and clowns everywhere, is to keep us looking over here. Look over here, don't look over there. Pay attention to us and what we're doing. Look at this thing, look at that thing, look at that war over there, look at this war over here, look at this natural disaster, look at this terrible thing over here, look at this funny thing, look at that celebrity's doing over there. And it's just smoke and mirrors. It's a circus. It's bread and circus, And 100%. the point is to not clock on to the obvious. The elephant in the room, the mountain under the rug, the stuff falling out of the closet. It's kind of, that's the whole point, isn't it? That's all they can do. They can't hide it. And now we're obviously poking holes in everything, kind of prodding away and peeking under that rug and saying, "Hey, everybody, have you seen what's over here?" And they're like, "No, don't look over there. Look over here." It's kind of, they're losing it now. They're losing people, and it's funny. It's kind of funny, isn't it,
Yeah,
in a way? And but
it
again,
is. And I really
clowns. That's why we have clowns. Is what I'm going to say. There you go.
totally. And I actually really liked that one that I've downloaded that one that you did regarding that. And it's so true. But we're still such creatures of distraction. Like we are so drawn to the eye. The eye just
Hmm.
catches it. You know, sometimes I'm like, sometimes, you know, if you were blindfolded and you couldn't really hear a lot, what would you think about? What would be on your mind the most? And I think it's fascinating to just picture our world without all of the distractions. It's hard to do, but I think if we can sort of get a perspective, or even like train yourself to respond to things biblically and spiritually, and not just react the way everyone else is. And I practice this at work. Actually, I'm the only Christian where I work, and I don't have any other Christians to talk to. I don't even have a lot of Christians in my daily life. I have met Jana recently, which is awesome, but I spend most of my time with people who aren't believers at all.
Mm.
Um, and so what's really nice is that I am, you know, it's challenging me daily to practice those responses to what I would say in a secular environment is very irreverent, disrespectful, you know, constantly saying the name of Jesus as a curse word, and a lot of other things that go on. Um, but really representing Christ in those situations. And they know I'm a Christian, and I know that they know I'm a Christian. So therefore, there's some accountability there as well, which is, you know, it's good for me. I don't want to hide. I'm not going to hide who I am. I'm just
Hmm.
going to be gracious, be loving, and not go along with everything that everybody's doing, you know. And I do expressly say, you know, I understand why you're doing this thing, but I'm not going to be participating in this thing.
Hmm.
Um, and it's really important to do. And God sees everything you do. And, you know, people don't understand, but at the end of the day, they still respect you. And in fact, I would say, I feel that they are actually respecting me more than if I just went along with everything. So I think the challenge pays off. And more than that, it's just that God sees everything that we do and say. And as long as he's happy, you know, it doesn't really matter what other people think. And Paul, I just totally respect the fact that you kind of, I would say you have the biggest platform out of anyone in this little season community, and you're very bold. I really appreciated you going on Eddie Bravo the other day, and just the very bold biblical stance that you took. It was awesome to hear. So I was just cheering you on. So that was great. And well done.
Well, thank you. Well, someone in the
Yeah.
chat there has said, Paul, when you countered the rising anti-little season movement, you and JT chose the lowest hanging fruit, a dumb blonde's TikTok video as your rebuttal. Like a question. They're like, why would you
Oh
do
yeah.
such a thing? And first of all, JT invited me on to do it, and I was actually a bit apprehensive because Rise had just got in touch on one of my recent live shows, and he was kind of like arguing with people in the chat, you know, and I wasn't expecting to have to defend myself against him in that moment, but on the
Mm-hmm.
spot, I kind of explained how, you know, our entire belief system and what it really is, because he had been told by this magical mystery church woman, a horrible straw man situation. And he obviously had bad ideas in his mind about what it is we believe and who we are, thinking we're satanic or Gnostics or something. And
Mm-hmm.
I tried to explain to him while I was in my chat that situation, you know. But the argument that was being used against him was, why didn't you come to Paul first and talk with him before lambasting him on your huge platform with like 382,000 subscribers, you know? So I was apprehensive about even making a video about this woman on TikTok because I haven't actually approached her first, you know, but JT had a few times. And I was like, okay, well, I don't want to make it about her. I want to make it about the points she raised, because anybody could have said them. She was just the one at that moment saying them that was gaining a lot of traction. But all the arguments she's made, I've heard 100 times before from many different people of all genders and ages and races and whatever. It doesn't matter. Anybody could have said those points she made, and they're always the same points. So I didn't want to make it about her specifically. And I made that clear in that rebuttal. This is just about the argument she has made. And we're going to go through the arguments. There's something that could be said about her attitude, sure, but whatever. I don't care about her personally. Maybe she's sincere and on fire for God and Jesus and just thinks she's honestly telling the truth, and that's fine, you know. But so in response to that, I would say it's not about her. We were responding to the arguments specifically. And we would, of course, use what's most popular at the time to gain the most attention so we can get the truth out there. So why wouldn't we? use her as the example. She's the one that made a spectacle of herself. Well, I suppose we're called to respond in a way, aren't we? But there are bigger channels who are more well versed than her who are definitely coming at us soon. I can tell you that right now. I'm getting comments from them every day, and I'm expecting not only big YouTubers to start saying stuff, but actual like church leaders and I don't know, experts in theological history and all these types are going to start coming out of the woodwork soon and debunking us in the best way they can. But I find all they have is a lot of rhetoric, but a complete disregard for
Agreed.
the words of Christ himself. And it's kind of, okay, so you got all this knowledge about what men have said after the fact, but what about the words of Jesus, the guy who's all based on, and just keep bringing them back to that point and everything crumbles. It says, okay, yeah, so you got all this history, which you said I need to ignore, and you've got all these writings of men that came after Christ that I now have to throw out the window. Sure, but what else am I supposed to do when Christ clearly said this? It's kind of the clinging on to the writings of men rather than the words of Jesus. And that's what we're going to be up against, and I don't feel like I'm saying anything that outrageous, to be honest. It's just they're taking it as outrageous because it crumbles everything they've built, and I suppose there's a pride issue that comes in where it's kind of like, how am I supposed to tell my congregation that I've been lying to them for so many years unknowingly? I think they have that in the back of the mind. It's like they're scared to even consider it because it means they have to admit that they've spent their entire life preaching not a wrong gospel. Salvation is clear, and the gospel for salvation is clear, but and perhaps an incorrect eschatology.
Well, the gospel is the kingdom. Like the gospel of the kingdom is that the kingdom came. That is the gospel. And as Lindsay mentioned recently, that the death and burial and resurrection of Jesus was actually a sign to that generation. It was the sign of Noah. So the gospel is the kingdom, which is what they're hiding. So are they really teaching the gospel if you're not teaching that the kingdom came? That's a big question. But I think you're right to answer, especially the more high profile accounts, because they are actually silencing the message in their own platform. And again, it's not about the people, the person themselves. They're just a vocal, they're just the spokesperson for all of the questions that a lot of people have, and they're trying to answer them, but very inefficiently, and they haven't done their work, like you said. So I think it is right. And there are a lot of people that will just be, kind of quietly watching and listening, who are listening to both sides of the story. So you do have to address it, like not you specifically, but like we as a community have to answer those questions, because it is on us to share why we don't go along with the common narrative of the Christian community.
we need to respond when challenged, I suppose, and I guess it was just happened to be me and JT who did it, and JT wanted to do it, and I said, okay, well, I'm free this evening, sure, let's hop on and do it together. Two minds are better than one when it comes to this type of thing. I don't have all the answers, and probably he doesn't either, I imagine. So combined, we can work together and figure this out. I don't know, I would have been happy to have you on with me as well to do this, because I think everybody who's kind of in this community, no matter how big your platform is, but you all kind of know the same stuff. We've all done the same research. We're all well versed in the same biblical passages necessary to defend this. I think when we are all called individually to defend this position, I think we're all capable. So it doesn't matter. Again, it doesn't matter who presented the facts. It could have been me. It could have been you. It could have been JT. It could have been Ricardo. It could have been anybody. It could have been Jason. It doesn't really matter like who presented the truth to these people. The truth is the truth, and it's unchanging. Whoever's presenting the arguments. Now, of course, we all each have our own speculative angles to all of this, and my video was about that point. And there's a lot of stuff we can only speculate about, and I don't think it's dirty to speculate. I just think we need to make it clear when we are, because our enemies are going to start using these against us. Oh, he claims as fact that it is this, when we clearly said, I'm just thinking maybe perhaps it could be this. But as though it's dangerous to even consider an idea, is how these people treat us. And that's no better than the Pharisees, as far as I'm concerned, or the Judaizers, or the enemies of God, or even the secular world. They are of the world if they're making that kind of argument in my eyes.
Yeah, I find people are a lot more open when they're actually willing to hear. I struggle to even entertain talking to people who just are not even in a open mind to listen. And that's something I think that's really important, especially, the Holy Spirit's guidance and prompting. I spoke to a woman a couple of weeks ago She's just come to the Lord, actually. And I find actually new Christians are very much more open to understanding eschatology in this way, because many of them do have experience with that former kind of rhetoric of the church. And to them, it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense to me when I was first in the church either. So I can relate to that. And it just makes sense when you start to explain it to people who are like, oh, why don't you believe what everyone else is believing in the church? And you say, well, and you just give them a few things, see how they respond, and then they come back again and they say, oh, that's really interesting. And so you can have a conversation then. But I find that sort of people who close their ears and just resist right from the get-go aren't even worth the energy or time. They have to come with a willing heart.
Yeah, I think you're right that, a lot of the people who come to this idea are perhaps newer Christians, but they would argue that's because you're not well versed in the word properly, and therefore you're being swayed to any doctrine with itching ears because you don't understand the words of Jesus, because you've not done the correct exegesis of the word like I have. You haven't gone to the correct seminary schools like we have. Expert X, Y, and Z says this about the interpretation. You just don't know that yet, so you're stupid, and therefore you haven't let Scripture interpret Scripture correctly, and you just don't know enough because you're a baby Christian. Therefore, you can't possibly understand the words of Jesus and what he really meant by the word generation. Therefore, disregard anything we have to say. And it's kind of, no, that's not how Christianity works. God is not the author of confusion, and I think our take is the least confusing take of all of them. And I think as God, what God likes to tend to do is get the foolish, what seems foolish to the world, to destroy those who consider themselves wise. And that's kind of what I feel like. Perhaps that's what's happening here in some grand way. Because I claim over and over again, like, and I've said this from the beginning, it's like, I'm not the guy, really. Like, what do I know? Who am I? I'm literally just some YouTuber who talks about the Nephilim looking like clowns for like 8 years, and now I'm talking about this somehow. But I feel like God is helping me through this in some way. There's something divine going on. I don't know what it is, or I'm trying to stay humble throughout the whole thing because I really don't know what I'm doing half the time. I know I might seem all cool, calm, and collect, but I feel like I'm just being used like a puppet half the time. I don't know what I'm doing, but all I know is I can't stop talking about this, and the stuff that's coming out of my mouth is just happening, and someone said to me today, it's like, oh, Paul, your entire life has been leading up to this point. Like, this is the whole reason. And I'm like, maybe not. I don't know. I couldn't say.
It's a good perspective to have. I mean, I think what I can see from outside looking in is you're being led by the Holy Spirit. JT is being led by the Holy Spirit. Why else would we do this? I mean, it is, on one hand, you can do a lot of conspiracies, right? You could be talking about a lot of things. There's no end to the conspiracies out there. So the fact that you're talking about this and you are putting yourself out kind of on a ledge. So I'm just going to get rid of somebody out of the chat there. Sorry.
He was in mine the other day.
It's like 2 people.
Yeah, it happens,
but anyway,
happens a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think just the fact that you could be talking about anything, but this is the thing that God has actually given you to talk about. And when you get that compulsion, because I have the same thing, I'm obviously looking at it from different angles and going through different kinds of evidence, but I some days cannot stop myself. And it's I don't like the word obsession, but it is almost like you cannot hold it back. You have to. And in a way, I'm not saying like we're prophets or we're like these big, huge names of the Bible, but like you can almost relate a little bit in some small part to people like Jeremiah, Isaiah, people who were being persecuted for saying the things that they were saying. But I think when the Holy Spirit moves you, you just open your mouth and this is what happens, And the evidence is that people are actually being touched by it. People are coming to the Lord through this message, which is incredible to me. But like, I see people on my channel saying the same thing, like the whole message never made sense to me until this final piece was in place. And I think that is just a testimony to exactly what God is doing here. And it's brought people, like someone said, they're on fire now, where before they were just kind of like blasé Christian going along with the current thing. And now they're actually like telling people about the Lord, which again, that is the work of the Holy Spirit. That to me is fruit. It's not just, you promoting yourself or whatever. It's fruit.
Well, it's imagine that proclamation. It's like Christ has come with his kingdom, and it's here right now on earth. It's happening
Yeah.
right now. It's an everlasting kingdom. You know, that much is clear. And just because we can't point to it, I don't know where it is, doesn't mean the kingdom isn't within, and we can't manifest and step into the kingdom at any moment in our life. That's finally
Hmm.
a gospel hopeful message that people can relate to, rather than this passive idea of, you know, as long as you just have faith and live your life and do your best and not sin, then maybe you'll make it to heaven in the end, or whatever that means. What is that? You know, that's such a weak, weird way of describing the gospel of Jesus, you know. I think
Hmm.
real context has been given now. It's like he didn't lie. He established his kingdom. He ruled for 1,000 years physically on earth, but it's an everlasting kingdom and it's here on earth right now. And you can
Hmm.
step into it. Someone said there in the chat, no, they don't have a president. They have a king. And they're not part of a
Yeah.
republic. They're a part of the kingdom, you know. And we can all,
Amen.
if everybody had that mindset and stepped into that kingdom of Christ, and became a subject of the kingdom, the whole world would
Yeah.
very quickly manifest heaven on earth, you know,
Yeah.
and that's what would happen. And I suppose that's the message that we're trying to get here, isn't it? And I'm not saying the end message is everybody needs to do that, so heaven, you know, heaven can come down from earth. There's clearly a linear
Hmm.
stage of events, the Gog Magog war, and then, you know, the final
Yeah.
judgment. But I suppose it's like those of us who are trying our best to step into that kingdom is bearing good fruit, and that's all we can go off. That's all we
Yeah.
have. You know, like I
Exactly.
said, it's actually bringing people. I've seen more people fall away from Christ thanks to the other eschatologies than come to Christ
Hmm.
personally.
And
You know.
I know, like I've heard you say, and I've probably said this myself, eschatology is not a salvation issue. Okay, I would agree, but why is Satan working so hard on this eschatology? Why is this such a big deal? It's because it feeds into something else. So in and of
Mm,
itself, maybe it's not a salvation issue. I would probably stay there. But there is going to be a point where it becomes a salvation issue, in my view, because I think if you are so blinded by things like is not real, which is my favorite um, real name for the the
it's not
place
real.
that is
Yeah.
politicized, right? And I think that that location has drawn so much of the fervor of the common Christian community that I think there is some reason for it. And Satan really does want people to fall away from their faith. Apostasy is real. The great falling away was a real thing, and I think it's a real thing now.
Mm,
So why not trick people with false eschatology into something that they are going to eventually fall away from the gospel?
hmm
Sort of by way of, it's like taking the wrong path off the main path. And
hmm
I just can't get that out of my head, that there is a risk here and Christians need to be aware of it. So as much as I believe everyone who believes, in Jesus Christ as their savior to forgive them of their sins and his blood cleanses them, that all is true. But do they know the wolf that stands around the corner just up ahead, which in my view is that whole false Christ, the coming of the false Christ, and
hmm
that sort of preceded understanding that they have of this kind of futurist dispensationalist
hmm
doctrine, and it's extremely dangerous. So
Yeah, I don't. Well, I don't think people's salvation might necessarily be a risk. I know it's the whole idea you once saved, forever saved type of situation, and a lot of people get upset when you maybe consider that might not be the case. And I don't know if that isn't or not the case. I don't think you can lose your salvation if you truly have your heart for Jesus, and He knows your heart. He knows truly if you've sincerely believed in His sacrifice and that He rose from the dead, or if you were just saying it. You know, He knows the difference. You can't pull the wool over God's eyes. But at the same time, if you are ignorant of where you are in the time or the agendas that are being used against you, you might be saved, but that doesn't mean the devil can't use you for his agenda. You know, and you want to, if you are a follower of Christ, you want to work towards his kingdom, right? You want to be on his side. You want to do his agenda, surely on earth. You know,
mhm,
so you can't be doing that if you aren't aware. And I think that's why my people perish for lack of knowledge is kind of an issue. And He
mhm,
says, my people. He doesn't say my people who are no longer my people because they didn't get enough knowledge. He says, my people perish for
yeah,
lack of knowledge, which means I'm guessing even those who I've saved who believed in me suffer in this
mhm,
world and fall victim to false things because they didn't
yeah,
know enough. They weren't paying attention, you know. And I
yeah,
think it's kind of saying just because you're a Christian doesn't mean you're not still going to get fooled. You know what I mean? I think a lot of people think, oh, nothing can get in my way anymore, you know, and it's kind of that haughty pride settles, and it's kind of like the devil has no sway over me. I love Jesus, and it's kind of, are you sure about that? Are you
yeah,
sure? You know, And this is just so thinketh Paul with no degree of certainty, not so saith the Lord. It's just an idea.
No, I hear you. I really appreciate you coming on, Paul. I know you have little children and you have, it's late there, so I will let you go. But I do appreciate all of this information. It's been very valuable. I know a lot of people will benefit today and in the future from this conversation. So thank you. And just appreciate the work that you're doing to continually get the message out there. It's been a real encouragement to me. And I know a lot of other people as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Madeline. No, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure talking to you. It always is. I enjoy it. I'll have to get you back on my channel and maybe we'll do a truth or therapy session and we'll hash it out some more because we could talk. We could talk for hours about this, and it's best to cut it off at some point and leave them wanting more, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know when to shut up.
Good. That's great. Well, thanks, Paul. I hope you have a really great night and take care. God bless.
You too. God bless.
Okay. Take care. Bye.
I want you to get together.